Welcome to another episode of College Admission TV. Dr. J.P. Novin talks with Dr. Colleen Perry Keith, president of Goldey-Beacom College, about the college's adaptation to workforce needs, emphasizing the integration of AI into the curriculum and offering workforce training certificates, particularly at the graduate level.
Welcome to Season 3 of the Higher Education Leader Podcast by Plexus. This is an exciting season of our podcast. We're discussing AI, education, and the future of workforce. I do like to thank our sponsor, directadmit.com, that helps students navigate their journey to higher education with clarity and confidence. I'm also excited to say that we also air these episodes now on collegeadmission.tv, so you could also watch them. I'm your host, JP Novin, and I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Colleen Perry Keith, or President Keith, the 14th president of Goldey-Beacom College in Delaware. Since taking office in 2019, Dr. Keith has become the first woman to lead the institution in its history, guiding the college through a period of innovation and growth. Under her leadership, Goldey-Beacom has experienced academic programs in high-demand areas such as cybersecurity, business analytics, artificial intelligence, while also investing in campus life, student success, and workforce-ready credentials. I also want to mention that Dr. Keith, you serve nationally as vice chair of the NCAA Board of Governors, bringing voice to Division II. You are very seasoned. You were also president of other institutions before this, but I'll hand it to you. Welcome to our podcast, and tell us a little bit about yourself and Goldey-Beacom, please.
Oh, thank you. I am delighted to be here. It's been interesting. This is my third college presidency, and I have been in higher ed now for about 40 years.
Wow.
And when I think about the changes that have existed, that have happened over the past 40 years, I often think about, is it cyclical? What is it is there anything in the past that I can learn from for the future? And actually that's kind of the approach we've taken recently with Goldey-Beacom because of workforce issues and all of that. Goldey, when we started back in 1886, for 140 years we've been doing this now. And when we started, we awarded certificates, and that became something that we all got thinking about here and realized with all the changes in the workforce and the demographic cliff, so the lack of traditional age students that are available to go to college, and what our employers are telling us that they're looking for, we thought, what, we ought to go really and embrace our history, and let's take a look at what can we do in the area of certificates as it relates to workforce training. And that has been, I think, a really good decision. We're starting to see it pay off now at the graduate level. We don't have a lot at the undergrad, but at the graduate level, we did produce some certificates, and that really has been of interest to area employers. I was at a meeting this morning of the Newcastle County Chamber, and there were a lot of employers there, and talking about what is it that they need. And some of them can't find enough workers. They've got people that are retiring, and they need to hire new to come in and take over some of those jobs, but they can't find the degreed individuals because there aren't a lot of people out there that have, sometimes specialized degrees. So we talked about, what is the training that you really need? And that's the kind of thing that Goldey-Beacom and a lot of other colleges can step into and learn from our history. So when I started at Goldey, coming in as a seasoned person, and then now, I'm entering my 7th year here and my 17th year as a college president, I look back and think, okay, there's a lot in those 40 years that I can bring to the table. And there's a lot that the college has gone through in 140 years that we can learn from, pull forward, and be able to create our future based on that learning in the past. It also helps because it it enables you to stay close to your vision and stay true to your vision and your mission. So, you're being true to who you are, and your lane, and you're going to stay in it, and you're going to expand as you need to and keep moving forward. So it's been interesting. Delaware is a very small state, but we're in the Mid-Atlantic region. And, we just have to keep looking at what's around us and talking to those employers and potential employers and see what they need and be able to figure out a way to meet their needs. So it's been fun, actually.
Yeah, I had a chance to actually look up your vision for 2028 strategic plan, and AI and emerging technologies were explicitly mentioned on there. And it looks like you guys, as you mentioned, you're off to running. You have the graduate certificate of AI with 9 credits. You have MBA concentration in AI. Your library, ethical AI literacy, you have AI in the library. You have stackable certificates around all of these. So you really are adhering to your vision. I mean, it just sounds like you hit the ground running in a lot of these areas. So you're the perfect person to ask our first question, which is...
Hopefully I have an answer.
I don't think anyone knows anything these days about what is happening so fast. So we're just exploring in a podcast, which is, how do you perceive the impact of AI on the future of workforce over the next 5 years?
I do wish I had a crystal ball on that one.
Yeah.
I think AI and generative AI in particular, I think it's something that's out there that we all have to understand, but I don't think we've yet fully understood what boost we're going to get in productivity from AI. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of ways to use it, and creating an agent to make things happen. That's one way to use it, but not everybody's adept at knowing how to do that. So I think over the next 5 years, we have to continually infuse what we do on our campuses and in our curriculum with artificial intelligence, so that students become adept at what it is, conversant with what it is, understanding how to use it in ethical ways, and then take that out. It's kind of like when you're a liberal arts graduate. I'm a political science graduate from an undergrad. You learn how to think, you learn how to problem solve, you learn how to bring those skills to bear at whatever you're going to be faced with in your career and in the workplace. It's the same with AI. So right now, I think where we are with all of that is we have to understand what it is. We have to find the ways that it can tap into every class that we teach and the work that we do, so that we become good problem solvers when it comes to how do you use AI. And then as AI develops, we'll have to keep refining that as we go along. So 5 years from now, it's going to be what we do in our classrooms with regard to artificial intelligence is going to be very different than what we're doing today. And, that's just a part of the evolution. But I think there are a lot of colleges out there that can do that very well. What we've done here at Goldey-Beacom, probably because the leadership team and I are just incredibly curious people, like, we will chase any rabbit and down any rabbit hole to figure out something and gain some knowledge about it. So we started looking at what artificial intelligence could mean, primarily because before COVID, Goldey-Beacom did nothing online. So we were not really all that digital. We weren't a part of the digital revolution. We still did a lot of stuff by hand in the business office. A lot of what we did was, on spreadsheets. And so we missed that digital revolution. But once AI came on board, we all realized, what? We're not behind anymore, because none of that matters. Artificial intelligence opens up a whole new world, and we can just tap in and run with it. And so that's what we started doing. So it was a little over a year ago. We pulled together a team of faculty and staff, and we are gathering as much knowledge as we can. We go through the Council of Independent Colleges. They're doing a regular training series on artificial intelligence. We're a part of that. We're a part of testing out with, like Copilot and different, LLMs. We're doing everything we can to understand what AI means and what it can do for us and what it can do for our students, and creating what are our policies, what's our path forward on it. So we just were very inquisitive, realized that we may have missed one revolution, but we don't have to miss this one.
Yeah.
And then started really embracing it. So, and I'm probably the least conversant of all the people that are on this team. I feel like I have to run to catch up sometimes. And, we're looking at now having, partnering for a generative AI approach for admissions. So we don't have a chat bot, but we will, but it'll be like a chat bot that can anticipate things that we really need to be anticipating. So we're not going to use it. We will use it for the data analytics that you get for it, like figuring out, where are we falling down on the communications funnel and that sort of thing. But we're going to use it more as an agent too, to be able to reach out and, recruit with it. So it's been an interesting conversation to have. And I do feel like I'm embracing it, but maybe I'm too old sometimes. I have to work twice as hard to make sure that I'm understanding what everybody else seems to be getting right away. But then, last week, I think it was, I was on a call with the CIC group for one of the workshops. And when they did a breakout session into small groups, all of a sudden I realized, hey, wait a minute, I'm actually ahead of the game. I know more than some of these people on here. So I was really proud of myself last week. But, the next one, I probably will be, bringing up the rear on whatever it is we need to know.
Well, given all the uncertainty around which jobs will change or even disappear because of AI, how do your programs like the AI certificate or workforce development initiatives going to help your students to stay adaptable, keep recalibrating their skills as a market shift, and also be attractive to employers?
Yeah, and what we're doing is listening carefully to what our students are telling us, what our graduates are telling us, but also what area employers are telling us. And so as we find that something is no longer needed, we're just not going to offer it any longer. So, as the world changes, we'll just stop offering some things and start offering other things. And we do that through partnerships that we have, like the RISE education. We bring in a lot of coursework through RISE, and that helps us to keep our curriculum strong. But right now, I wish that I had, that crystal ball or a futurist, somebody who could say, now this is going to go away down the road. I don't know that anybody really knows all of that now. You can kind of see it. And so we just have to stay alert and keep talking and keep listening and be in every conversation that we can be in. When I was at the meeting that I was at this morning, I kept listening for, where are these people? One of the employers was Artesian Water, and they were talking about how their water lab people, the water quality and all that, they were having a hard time with they have an aging population. So a lot of those types of jobs, those people are retiring, but there's no one coming up along. And I said, well, what's the role that AI can play in that? And they hadn't really thought about that. So, at Goldey, we don't have a science curriculum, but I do have data analytics. I do have, how do you use data? That I have coursework that could help in that. And, I have to think more creatively about, could I fill a need for them without a science program? And there's probably, with artificial intelligence, a way that I could. Because if somebody can, run the testing on the water, they need somebody who can take the step back and take a look at what it is that all of the test results are saying. That would be something I could train people to do through a certificate program. And so as AI changes up, maybe that's one way that we partner with them and they use AI and we provide other training that, helps to meet their workforce needs. And I'm sure there's probably, hundreds of other ideas out there with other corporations that could do the same thing.
Every year at Plexus, we survey and interview presidents, and there's been a shift as far as presidents' perception of the major challenges to their institution, especially the more private liberal arts-based institution. 2-3 years ago, the question of the enrollment cliff was really looming. I would say this past year, the negative perception of the value of college has now trumped that concern. So imagine a parent who's now looking at AI disruption and wondering, will my son or daughter be able to find good careers when they graduate? And let's use your school, for example. Mm-hmm. Why should I send my kid to Goldey-Beacom given these uncertain times? And what values, what are my kids going to gain coming out of this after 4 years or what have you? That's going to, create some level of insurance that they'll have job coming out of college.
Yeah, good question. And something I do wrestle with every day. Mm-hmm. And especially if we have tour groups coming through and I'm talking to parents. We're traditional or historic business college. So we have accounting, we have business management, and we've built majors off of those. There's always going to be a need for business management, accounting, that type of thing. There's always going to be a need for that, but there's always going to be a change in the job because of artificial intelligence. So you're not going to, do I need to teach Excel anymore? Does anybody really need to use it anymore? And probably yes, but also probably not. So that gets back to that, what's the appropriate use of artificial intelligence in each of these areas? And that's what we talk to parents about, that this is what we're looking at every day. And as the world changes with regard to that, we will change our curriculum with regard to that too, keeping our faculty involved and, understanding what it is. Then we can build on our, we have had a very successful, they don't call it career placement rate anymore, but that's the old language for it. We usually, in any given year, we will have better than 90% of our graduates they graduate and they get jobs in their field, or they're doing something in their field. They might be going on for a graduate degree or something, but whatever it is they came here to do, better than 90% of them are doing that after they graduate from here. So we have a great reputation in that regard, but you got to maintain that reputation. And that's why we have to keep staying, vibrant in the curriculum. I don't know that there's any field where they can say, this is, 5 years from now, this is what this field's going to look like. So I think our approach to making sure that all of our graduates are literate when it comes to artificial intelligence in whatever field they're in is going to serve them well so that they can adapt as they go forward. And then what we have to keep doing is staying close to what every field is requiring so that we can continue to offer certificates or workshops or whatever the appropriate level of training is, because they're going to have to keep coming back. I think more than ever, we're in a world where people are lifelong learners. I think that's always been true, but I think it's going to be more true for the foreseeable future because of the changing nature of the world of work. And I don't know that companies, when I think about like Artesian Water, how they're going to need higher ed partners. They really aren't going to have the internal capacity to create the kinds of training that they need for their employees to have. So they're going to need a close partnership with educational institutions to be able to provide that. And I think that's a market for colleges, especially as we're facing, lower enrollment numbers at the traditional student age.
Now, Delaware is a very interesting state, and I actually think other states should be a little jealous if you're young, because first of all, you have huge, like DuPont is there, AstraZeneca, you have some very large corporations there.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from 98% of all startups incorporating in Delaware. But also I read in the Department of Education that by 2030 in Delaware is expected to replace 31% of its workforce through turnovers and retirement, which means that your job placement, there is a need for your graduates to actually, and Delaware is hiring. Is that something that in concert with what you all are thinking in terms of training and AI?
It is. Biopharma is a big thing here. AstraZeneca is here. Merck has now moved in. And, those jobs, you can't find enough people here. That workforce is the biggest issue that Delaware has. One of the biggest. Housing is also an issue. But getting a workforce that can fill all of those biopharma jobs is a major problem. And that's one of the things that I think artificial intelligence can help with. That same meeting I was at this morning, I was looking at the certificate programs that a group called BioConnect Delaware, I think is what it's called. So they're doing a training program, and I think there were like 5 or 6 areas in which they were doing the training, and they can't provide enough of the training. So they have 25 spots, and they had something like 170 applicants for those 25 spots to go through their training program. And I thought, you know what? So as I'm sitting there, I'm texting my provost and saying, going on my phone, looking at what it is they're doing, sending it to him saying, check out each of these areas, because I think we could put something together and we could help meet that need and do it in a way that would help the state with gaining those workers, because Delaware does have a lot of job opportunities. And the state also has an issue keeping young people in the state because it is a small state. The tax structure is such that if you want to retire, you really want to retire to Delaware because, it's a very favorable tax state for retirees. We have beaches, and a lot of retirees move to the beaches. So, and if you live in the lower part of the state, you're not really close to any metropolitan areas. So if you live up in the Wilmington area, you're close to Philadelphia, you're close to Baltimore, you've got all that. Well, young people, want to have things that they can go do, a vibrant life outside of work. So that becomes a problem in attracting the workforce too. But, making sure that we're meeting the educational needs is the piece that we can play. And that's the part that, we try to stay on top of all the time. But it is hard. We had a program for a while. It's now being run by Leadership Delaware, but it was the Intern Delaware, and the state chamber ran it for a number of years. Now it's moved over to Leadership Delaware, and they're trying to attract more interns into the state because we do have like DuPont, and we have, the lower part of the state has a lot of farming, mountain air farms, that type of thing. So big chicken farms down in that part of the state. And it's hard to keep young people unless you have all the amenities. And so what happens is they may come here to work, but they're going to go live in Philly or, over in Jersey, someplace like that, and not necessarily in the Wilmington area.
Well, I'm sure the cost will be attractive there. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of jobs in Delaware. And so as you think about industries, just looking around, which industries do you anticipate, especially in the next 5 years, to be most affected by AI negatively, meaning that jobs that are going to be displaced or severely reduced? Which industries come to mind to you?
Well, a number of the ones that we actually, provide education for. So accountants, you're still going to need a person, but you're not going to need as many people. So things in the fintech arena, I think those jobs are going to be impacted. The legal profession is going to be impacted. Do you need as many paralegals or lawyers when you can do a lot of the legal research by asking the right questions into, an AI system that can then search through LexisNexis or whatever it is they search through? So I do think, the service industries, you're still going to need people to do things, except you're already seeing where you don't need as many. You go into, I have 2 grandchildren, and so you go into McDonald's and you order either on the app or you order on the screen, and there's no one standing there taking your order. So, that kind of thing has already taken jobs out of the service industry. You're just going to get more of that. I do think, though, when you look at the area, we have a large program in psychology and then a master's program in counseling psychology. And you can have artificial intelligence that plays a role in a counseling setting, but that scares me a lot. And I'm not so sure what the impact is going to be on that industry, the whole mental health industry. I think that's just problematic, because there are so many nuances when you're dealing with a person with regard to mental health issues. You need a human being there to manage a lot of that. So, and that's a big need area anymore. But I do worry, we're looking at what's the role that AI does play in that field, because I want our graduates to be well-versed, but I do think that's one area that may not be touched as much by artificial intelligence.
I think there's concern for entry-level jobs, that's for sure. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You just mentioned McDonald's. Hey, I work at McDonald's. A lot of people, in high school or working some sort of, jobs at that point. But if it's all, self checkouts and what have you, you look at, fields like computer science. I mean, just golly, for about 20, 30 years, computer science was gold.
Yeah.
And I think there's another thing. How do you approach like risk assessment while still trying to innovate? Like if you think about compliance frameworks like HIPAA and SEC and FERPA and GDPR, are you at all concerned that the rate of innovation that AI is bringing might outstrip these regulations? Like kind of like what happened with internet and social network, and is that of any concern to you?
Yes, it is, especially when you think about like with FERPA.
Yeah,
we abide by the law when it comes to that, but how do I know? I always am going back. We had a mom who called recently, wanting a lot of information about an issue her daughter was having. The daughter had not given permission for us to be able to talk to the mother. And, what's going to stop somebody being able to do something through AI that, all of a sudden there's a form that comes through and the daughter has supposedly given permission, but the daughter hasn't given permission. And then we're providing information to mom that, the daughter didn't want disclosed. We've then violated her privacy, and that's not something we want to do. I think the same thing with HIPAA. You work so hard to lock down things. When I think about our student athletes working with our trainers, we make sure that, all their HIPAA data is, under lock and key, basically. It's locked down so that you can't, get into that. There's always been hackers that can probably hack through to get something, but, things could be forged in ways that you wouldn't even know. And that's going to create problems. So we have to be doubly sure of what we're doing. And, I feel like sometimes we ask a lot of questions and, the poor students are rolling their eyes like, why do I have to keep answering this? But it's, two-factor authentication is probably going to go by the wayside, and we're going to have 3- and 4-factor authentication just to be able to know that you are who you say you are. And, I don't know when it's going to end, but I do think that I don't even think we've scratched the surface yet of what all the issues are.
Yeah, I think a true digital fingerprint is not universal yet, but somehow, the way things are going, I don't know what's going to be in my brain soon.
Right.
What's going to be implanted?
Yeah, and there are
brains.
so many ambiguities in decision making. There's multi-layered approvals that are needed and complex hierarchies and, inflexible role designs. All of that obstructs the transformation that AI can have. And so we've got to solve those issues and then kind of move forward with what really needs to happen.
So I think you answered this question, but correct me if I'm wrong. As far as adapting and modifying programs, looks like you're looking at the job market and you're responding to that, right? You're seeing what the job market is looking at. So let me ask you this. Do you see the degree granting process in higher ed changing as a result of AI and workforce disruption? And even when it comes to accreditation, as you sit in all of these boards, tell us what's happening in those boards as far as, what worries people?
Well, I think degree programs will get shorter. We're already seeing the move toward approvals for three-year baccalaureate degrees, and the trend toward more certificates, and like what we have done, stacking certificates so that people can come in and in 3 or 4 classes get what they need and then go out and work. So you're going to see more of that. And I think it's going to be a game of, we're going to be catching up all the time. I think business and industry is going to advance with AI faster than higher ed will. And so as they advance, we're going to have to play catch up and try to make sure that we're meeting some needs. So I don't know that there's an answer out there yet for that. I think we're still in that early stage where we've got to figure it out, build the plane as you're flying it. That's really what it feels like. Even, the whole concept of community engagement. I chair the board for a group called Transform Mid-Atlantic, which used to be Campus Compact. And, so there's a national campus compact, but we're a region place-based campus compact. We're a TMA. And they, the focus there is on community service and civic engagement. And we're just now starting the conversations on what changes with what we do for civic engagement and community service because of the role that AI plays. And there's not a good answer for that yet, because the work that they've been involved in is, feeding the hungry, making sure that people, the disenfranchised, have a voice, that type of thing. And, we haven't figured that out yet. And that's something that we really do have to figure out, so that, we're helping to form people into the kinds of professionals that they want to be as they enter their adult lives. So it's, and, when I think about how to use it here, I had a conversation with an employee not too long ago. We were talking about compensation decisions, and, we do a salary study and all this. And the employee was really excited about the role that AI could play in compensation, because they believe that humans are more biased than AI would be. And so, AI is going to be a more fair way for them to be evaluated, and, whatever the compensation decision is that stems from that. And I think that could be true, but I also think it's, maybe not true, because it depends on the logarithm that's, in place. And, the jury's still out for me on that. But, are there management bots that can be brought into play to help with the performance management approach? And, that's something we have to deal with as an employer. But I also, teach HR classes. So I've got to make sure it's in there too. So I just feel like the jury's still out. I just, we have to constantly be changing and constantly shift what we do so that we're meeting needs.
So, every industrial change, from steam engine to mass production, internet, has disrupted jobs, but also created entirely new ones. I guess with AI moving so fast, do we have enough run rate in the next 5-10 years, with entry jobs being replaced, mid-level jobs being reduced? Do we have enough run rate to basically recalibrate our economy fast enough so we don't have massive layoffs?
I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that. My gut tells me that we don't, that the role of AI will go faster than the role of organizations to keep up with it. And so, we may end up finding that some more entry level jobs than we even anticipated have gone by the wayside. And then that's just going to keep creeping up into the mid-level jobs. And, I don't know the answer. I think that's a part of what we all have to keep talking about.
Only if we had a policy, a national policy to reskill and get ready for this coming. Only if we had one, perhaps, right?
That would be awesome.
So, last question. What would Goldey-Beacom look like 5 years from now, in lieu of what's happening in AI and generative AI?
I think we will look more like a corporate training. I think we will look a little more corporate in our training in terms of what our business is going to be needing. I think we will stay closer to the workforce needs of the Mid-Atlantic area and work to respond to that. I think that's how we started. I think it's a very viable future for us, and it's something that speaks to our strengths, and it helped, I had said earlier, we don't have a science program. So, Does it make sense for us to start a science program? In some ways, yeah. I mean, it really does. But I think we would be further ahead to stay close to what the workforce needs are and be able to respond to those going forward. I think that would be not just a clearer path, but I think a more viable path for who we are.
Fantastic. Well, President Keith, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the College Admission TV Presidential Podcast. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll bring you another insightful conversation with a distinguished leader in higher education.